Thank you so much, Streama. Ooh, got a little notification. So I'm very excited to be moderating today. As Dreama said, I definitely have a background in love for public service, just from a personal standpoint. And so while I might not want to pursue a career in it, I definitely have a great love for it. And so we're going to go ahead and transition to our panelists. So thank you all again so much for joining us today. And our lovely panelists are working in state and local government, and they are going to be able to introduce themselves better than I would be able to introduce them. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first question. So could you, each of you, please introduce yourselves, share the organization you work for, and describe your role in it? And Rachel, if we could go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's great to be here with you. I'm not that far out from your positions, so I can kind of relate to that. Um, I work for the City of Richmond Department of Housing and Community Development. So I work for the local government in the City of Richmond. Um, I do a lot local government, and something you'll hopefully glean from this is there's a lot of opportunity to learn, develop, and grow and work on a lot of different projects if you're in local government. So I manage a pretty big portfolio of the City of Richmond's housing development projects for affordable housing development, investments that we've made using local and federal dollars for those. I work with other departments across the city to make sure that we're aligning our policy, that we're aligning our programs to make sure that we're most effectively and efficiently meeting the goals that the city has set for itself and also supporting our residents. And I'll pass it off to Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex, class of 2019. I work for Delegate Maldonado as a chief of staff in the General Assembly. So I work for a state legislator, and I'm also the executive director for the Virginia Latino Legislative Caucus. And what those roles mean is that I basically do everything under the sun, from setting out legislative and policy agendas to the constituent services to communications and everything in between. Happy to talk about it. Huge fan of state government. I also live in Richmond, luckily, so I'm always here to be able to attend a committee or a commission and roll out of bed if need be and make it to a meeting in less than 10 minutes. But that never happens, but it's always good to tell people that I'm that available. So I'll pass it off to Zach.
Hi, everyone. Zach Jacobs. I have the privilege of serving as the Deputy Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth under Governor Youngkin. I was appointed to Governor Youngkin's administration back in 2023, originally serving as the Assistant Secretary, overseeing both K-12 and higher education when it comes to our legislative and policy agenda, and now more focused on our higher education, cultural institutions, and museums for Virginia. We have 56 agencies under the Secretary of Education that ranges all the way from early childhood care and education all the way through post-secondary. And then, like I mentioned, our museums and cultural institutions that are state-run entities. I've been graduated from Virginia Tech, so I'm a Hokie. I'm not a Wahoo, but don't hold that against me. I am a big fan of UVA and this program that you all are a part of. So kudos to you all for taking part of this. I wish that there was something at Virginia Tech like this, because this is awesome. But this is my first role in the state government, although I've worked with state and local and federal government throughout my career in different capacities. As a lobbyist, I worked for two members on Capitol Hill, one from Virginia, Congressman Ben Cline, who represents the Shenandoah Valley, 81 corridor area. And then also have served in federal executive branch as well, and so now here in the state executive branch. But happy to talk and looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Great. Thank you all so much for your introductions. So before I jump into my handful of questions, I just want to let students know that if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will also be saving about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for you to ask our panelists direct questions. So, go ahead and going into our first real question. We would love to know what inspired you to work in the public government sector and how did you get started?
I can jump on for this. So as I mentioned, I am fairly new to my career. I graduated undergraduate from UVA in 2022 and did my master's degree through the Batten School of Public Policy in 2023. So I did the accelerated master's program. If any of you are eyeing it, I'm happy to talk about that as well. As part of my master's degree, there's an internship requirement between your first and second years of your graduate school. And so I came and worked in the mayor's office for the city of Richmond. And I really enjoyed my experience there and learned a lot and got to be really hands-on. And so upon graduating, I was looking at other opportunities to come back to the city and was fortunate enough to come back in the Department of Housing, which if you know anything about accessing housing right now, no matter where you live, it's really a big issue. And for the city of Richmond in particular, that is rapidly growing and seeing a lot of in-migration and movement of people around the city. Housing is really important and it's kind of an essential thing. So I'm lucky that I am not only in a great department, but also working on a really critically important issue right now.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I know it's um, it was a long path, but in high school, I would say I worked with one of our city council members in Virginia Beach to change some of the policies as it concerned like bullying for LGBTQ students. And Virginia Beach is, it's not a liberal place, and it was a great opportunity to work with a Republican city council member and really identify something that we could all agree on. And ever since then, it seemed like one of the things that I really wanted to do was to advocate on certain issues that I cared about, and to do it in ways and in connection with, the quote unquote powers that be, whether that's government, legislature. And when I was in UVA, I was heavily involved in student council, which meant that I was constantly working with the administration and the board of visitors. And I found that I personally had a really good um, I was really good at talking to administrators and going into committees and commission meetings and all these work groups and having, I would say, an agenda, say, like, I want to get this thing done and come out of the meeting with some successes. In student council, and I don't know how student council is for folks nowadays or what your experience is with it, but when I came in, it was very much something where you planned events, right? And that was the extent of what the organization did. But by the time I left, I made sure that student council was more like the students' lobbyist, right? You're advocating on behalf of students, on behalf of the issues that students care about. And so as I was doing that, I just found that the thing that I really liked doing was working with people, which was essentially government relations. And I found myself ultimately applying for a program, actually working as a governor's fellow in Zach's department, specifically for the person whose role that he currently occupies in the Secretary of Education for higher education. I think it's an amazing role and it's super cool. It was a great opportunity for me as somebody who was in student council to see how things work from the state side, and everything's just flowed from there.
Yeah, well, I'll echo what the Rachel and Alex have said, but also for me, I knew that I had a passion for politics and policy specifically, and but I didn't want to go and just be a lobbyist right away. I wanted to learn more about what it meant to be in public service and what it meant to from the inside kind of create and implement the policy, but then also when working my first job at a college was I was a political appointee at the Department of Agriculture in Washington D.C. and in the Office of Congressional Relations, and so had a lot of bosses in that realm, right? Had the secretary as the boss, the president as the boss, but then things came from Congress that we were required to do, statutorily required to do, but then also different initiatives that required our attention. And so I got to work with a lot of different people in that, which really kind of reaffirmed that the attitude of public service is to serve the public, and it was a really fulfilling to be a part of that. And but just really also wanted the opportunity to learn um, more about how the sausage was made, if you will. So that way, if I chose to go and be a lobbyist, that made me a better advocate and lobbyist for the cause, because you truly have a ground up understanding of how it all works, and then have just felt been in the public sector for the majority of my career, and have just really enjoyed being a part of that, and getting to serve a certain constituency or the general public. And in this case, we have 8.6 million bosses as the population of Virginia. So that makes life a lot of fun. So.
Great. Thank you all. It sounds like your experience kind of show a lot of the different ways and pathways of getting into the public sector, and a lot of your different aspirations for wanting to do it. So thank you all for sharing. Um, So one thing that we see a lot of students question is kind of why state and local government over federal government. And Zach, I think you would particularly have a great insight into this question. But what are some of the benefits and drawbacks to exploring opportunities in state and local government versus the federal government?
Sure, yeah, I can kick us off here with this one. I wish that I would have started in the state government before going to the federal government, just because you learn so much more about the policies, the procedures, and the processes that go along with working in government so much faster at the state and local level, because it's very real. It's happening in a much at a much faster pace than it is at the federal level. But both are extremely valuable. But you just have to kind of manage expectations at the federal level that you're not going to get a whole lot done in a short amount of time, like you do here in the state government, working in the General Assembly or the governor's office, or at the local level, which is all are really critical roles. But the federal level, you just have a lot more of the hoops to jump through, and the bureaucracy, where it's not a one-on-one working relationship in a lot of ways, but it's you're working for everybody, Congress, the white whoever occupies the White House, the agencies, and then the people that those agencies impact. And so it changes the nature of it all, but you've got a lot of the hoops you have to jump through to make things happen. And so, in my time on Capitol Hill, I got way more done in my first, 60-day General Assembly session than I did in 2 years on Capitol Hill. So what I did in 2 months would have taken me 4 or 5 years on Capitol Hill to do. So you just have to recognize that and understand where your interest lies. Now, again, I love DC. I love my time on the Hill. It was a lot of fun. But if you want to really get into the policy space and learn how to write legislation that is going to be that's going to get passed, and that is going to have to be implemented, starting at the state or local level is really the best way to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I would definitely echo a lot of what Zach said in terms of, the benefits and just how deep you can get into things at the local or state level. I'm working at the local level, so I'm going to speak to that. But I will say, even as a newer staff to the city, being here for about a year and a half now, I've been given an enormous amount of responsibility, trust, but then also an opportunity to really make sure that the things that are being advocated for, or the processes of the programs that we're doing, are developed and implemented correctly. And it's also a really rewarding experience. I have lots of opportunities to interact with constituents and residents on a face-to-face basis. One of the first programs that I did was helping manage, when I came to the city, managing a owner-occupied home rehab program, which is basically, you need maybe a new roof in your house and you couldn't afford to do that, and you were qualified for the program, the city would come in and align the contractors, align all of the different things that were needed to get that new roof on your house. And it was really awesome to see the impact and the gratitude of residents who have lived in the city for decades often, and really just in the changing environment that we live in, weren't able to do some of those necessary repairs on their homes to keep them to be safe, livable places to be. This might be taboo, but I also am having a little bit of comfort in my job security right now, in that we know that the local and state governments are, while they certainly have changes in leadership and elections and have politics just like anywhere else. They're not quite as big and large as they are on the federal scale right now, and I think that there is some just safety and security in that, if I'm being honest. And I think that just at this level, again, as Zach said, there's so much opportunity to learn, to work with peers at different levels, in a way that you may not get to do even at the state level, and definitely not at the federal level. You're probably as a in your first 1 or 2 years of your job, not directly writing legislation that is then going to city council or to the state government to be.
I'll use a specific example. So I work in state government. I have so far been a staffer for multiple principals. And that's largely been my role instead of like working at a specific agency as some kind of policy analyst. But I'll say the more local you are, the more impact you have, right? And I think both Zach and Rachel have said it, and they both have, better and more granular ways to describe it than I do. But I can say one of the cool things about working for state government is what you do has a timeline, as a lifetime and timeline of roughly maybe like a few years. Right when I was at UVA, one of the things that I wanted to do there and that I did in student council was trying to get a food pantry started. And I remember distinctly having a conversation with Madison House about getting seed funding for a food pantry. And I know the president after me, Ali Rasacchio, she got it going. She got it, off the ground and really secured funding for it for the long term. And then I, joined the Governor Northam's administration and in the Secretariat of Education. One of the little projects we had was to look at food pantry access and get data on that at the state level. And I learned a lot. It was really wonderful. It was a good 2 months. And it's super cool. And this will lead into my second point here. But it's super cool to then see on the Virginia Mercury that the governor is signing legislation essentially providing grant funding for food pantries to colleges and working with other local food banks. So that's something that I had a small part in, but the idea was there, and then it got carried out. And not only did it get carried out within like a few years, but there's a bipartisan approach to it. I think you see a lot more bipartisanship, a lot more comedy here at the state level than you do at the federal level. Because at the federal level, I mean, I don't want to speak too ill of it. I haven't worked at the federal level, but it does seem to me that there's a lot of communications going on there and not a lot of work that's actually being accomplished. But at the state level, you might get some, people trading barbs, right? Whether it's the governor and the speaker or the Senate leadership or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things we do agree on and that, get accomplished. And you end up making friendships and relationships with folks, no matter what background you have. And I think, if you have a lot of energy, there's a lot of good that you can do at the state level.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you for sharing about the impacts and the very tangible experiences that you have in kind of serving your communities. And so I would love to know, while it sounds like there's all sorts of benefits to working in the state and local government, every job has its challenges. And so what challenges do you face in your role and how do you overcome them?
I'm happy to start here. I think any resident who's lived in the city of Richmond for a long time has their own criticisms of the city government, and everyone has criticisms of every government, no matter the level. But I think the biggest challenge that I found is making sure that as we're doing a program, as the city has this really exciting new idea, that it's not just an idea, but that it's a program that is fully fleshed out and will be sustainable in the long term. So as I mentioned, I manage a bunch of different portfolios of projects. In my office, there's a lot of acronyms, so I'm just going to stick with acronyms. And you're welcome to follow up or do a little research on what they are. But I manage a portfolio of ARPA, of EHP, and the performance grants. All three of those are new programs within the last like 3 years, which means that not only am I managing all of these programs that have millions and millions of dollars and thousands of affordable housing units tied to them, but I'm also building the programs as I'm running them. So there is a little bit of a building the ship and paddling it too. And that can definitely come with its own challenges, especially I'm learning on the job. I'm creating programs, I'm running the programs, I'm doing a lot all at once. But I think that also gives you the opportunity to really develop your skills in being nimble and being flexible, and being able to balance multiple tasks at once. I know as college students, you all know how to balance multiple tasks at once. And I think that is, a really valuable skill. And you've learned a lot with time management and how to do all of those things, I'm sure, by now in your college career, no matter where you are. But using those skills and keeping them in check while, making sure that you don't burn yourself out, I think is really important and can certainly be a challenge no matter what level you're at. But I think especially at the local government, when you are a lot more visible to the constituents, you might have direct phone calls. I get phone calls almost every day from, different constituents in the city asking me about this program or that program and trying to direct them to the right resources while also running different programs and making sure that the city is moving and chugging along forward.
I can pop in next here. I think for us in particular in the governor's office as a whole, there's a divided executive branch and general assembly, and so that certainly has its own challenges, right? And when it comes from everything down to the legislation that is passed, to the budget that gets signed, and you have that in every aspect of government. You're going to have people that you disagree with, and initiatives that maybe don't align with what you personally or professionally believe in. But at the end of the day, it's to Alex's point here in Richmond, it's much easier to work across the aisle than it is at the federal level. And we at the state government also get to work with the local governments in a lot of ways, which is a lot of fun too. And so, for us in education, one of the hardest parts about this job is that we have a lot of school divisions, right? 131 school divisions that are autonomous and have full control over their school division, which is great. But sometimes in terms of organizing or getting everybody on the same page in terms of the type of education that our students are getting, or programs that are available, that differs, right? And so you've got a lot of folks in Northern Virginia that are in these large high schools, but where I come from is very rural. And so, for an example, I didn't have dual enrollment access when I went in high school, where I went to high school, right? But you've got students now that are graduating with an associate's degree along with their high school diploma, right? And so it is really hard in the education world to try and find the right path forward that fits everybody, while also not just cutting a blank check, right? Because all of that comes with, you have to have some accountability with that too, of if you're getting money from, whether it be from the state or the federal or your local government, you need to be able to justify the need for that money. But also, if you need more, you need to have the metrics to show that, to then prove that kind of stuff is working. So having 131 school divisions, 23 individual community colleges, 15 public 4-year institutions, and a public 2-year institution, and then all the private colleges. that are all doing different things, it can be hard to align all that together and to, to work together to fund an initiative because everybody is super siloed in a lot of ways. And so I think that's across the government is that state agencies, look out for their own entity as they should, but it makes our job hard to do a lot of cross collaboration, and so the bureaucracy of some of our job just kind of takes some time, which can be challenging when you don't have a lot of time, because my job has an expiration date on it, right? And so the governor's administration will end in January, and so we've got a little over 9 months left or so. And so, we are on a tight timeline. And so, knowing that there's a lot to get done, and in Virginia being the only state that has non-consecutive governorships, you only get 4 years, and that's a hard deadline to make everything that you want happen. And so that's probably the biggest challenge facing our office, I think.
I mean, I'd say one of the biggest challenges could also be the biggest benefits. Everything is dependent on you, at least at this level. I feel like at the federal level, you could have the best relationships with the best people from anywhere and everywhere, and it might not make any difference because of, what's happening at quote unquote the top or at levels beyond you. But at a state and local level, you are given a lot more responsibility, I think, a lot earlier. And, I mean, you might be 22, 23, 24, and you find yourself like second in command of an agency, or you might find yourself in charge of millions of dollars. It's a challenge because, um, it's a lot to really acclimate to, but it's also a benefit because if you really care and if you're really, a go-getter, um, you can do a lot of good.
Great, thank you all. So it sounds like you're drawing upon a lot of different skills like flexibility, being able to communicate across different lines with stakeholders. And so when you're thinking about what other skills and qualities you're using in your roles, which ones do you think have made you most successful, or do you think would make somebody most successful in this field?
I think I'll say the first one that comes to mind for me, and I'll let you go, Zach. I think being able to think critically, but also be decisive is really important. There's going to be a lot of different pressing issues that come to your desk, that you should definitely evaluate and make sure you're making a good decision. But there's a lot of those issues. So you need to be able to kind of be decisive, and move on to the next thing, knowing that you made an informed decision. And you can always, not always, but you can come back to, different things at different points, but there are certain times where you have to make the decision and move to the next.
Yeah, that's a great one, Rachel. And I would say that you also have also have to have the ability to communicate effectively in these roles. You've got a lot of different stakeholders. So I started off by saying I have 8.6 million bosses in this job because we serve the citizens of the Commonwealth, right? And not everybody understands education policy just as much as the Secretary of Education might, right? And so you have to learn how to create not only relatable content and messaging, but also something that is palatable across a wide array of constituents that you are serving. And so whether you're talking about what's in the state budget or you're talking about a program that is led out of a state agency, all of that depends, but you have to be able to communicate that effectively to the relevant stakeholders. And that could be the customer itself, that could be the state agency leadership, or that could be, members of the General Assembly. So it really just depends. But that's probably one of the biggest qualities I think we have to possess in these jobs is you have to learn how to effectively communicate.
Very similar to that, just good customer service. At the end of the day, that's what we do. We're serving customers, customers being the constituents. Um, I'd say, I mean, it's a skill you can develop, but one that I absolutely would emphasize is just having a very friendly disposition. Just be a good person, be a nice person. You never know, right? And that's just something you should do for all of life. But I'm sure you could get away with it if you're in the business sector. But over here, I think in the government side of things, you should absolutely be kind to everyone. And that gets you so much further than you think. And a lot of folks find a lot of success, not necessarily by being the best at X, Y, and Z, but by being one of the most amiable people that you would know and somebody that you would get along with. So if you're interested in public service, critical thinking, absolutely, communication, absolutely. And people will always tell you networking, but I would say absolutely just be kind.
Great. Thank you all. And so, moving to our last question before turning it over to our students. Is there anything that you really wish you would have known before you got started on your career path, or any advice that you would give these students?
I think one thing that a lot of, I think, like, especially when you look at the difference between public service, and all of you are here today because you're probably interested in public service at some degree. But I think that there is often somewhat of a misinterpretation or misunderstanding that going into government or going into public service means you're not going to make very much money, or you are going to be in a certain area and kind of stuck there. I would like to dissuade that. I don't think that's true, and I know that I'm earning more than a lot of my peers who might be working in the private sector, while also having a really rewarding experience where I know that not only am I helping people in my community, but I also get to learn. I get to shape different programs and policies, and kind of leave a little bit of a watermark, if you will, on the work that I've done, in a way that you might not get to do if you are, let's say, a salesperson or a marketing rep or something like that. Not that any of those careers are bad, but I think that you can both have a lucrative career. You can be very successful if that's what you want in your life, and you can have a really meaningful and impactful career.
I'd say that we're all UVA, well, not we all, but all of you UVA students. And at some point you'll graduate. And if you're interested in public service, you'll probably already have assumed some kind of leadership position. Or by the time you graduate, you will have some leadership position in some organization, whether that's one or multiple. One thing that I wish I'd known or had like fully grasped and internalized, and I wouldn't consider myself a prideful person, but like once you go out into the real world, right, you're gonna get humbled. You're back at the bottom of the pecking order, and it takes a while for you to pay your dues. And you might be the smartest in the room immediately. You most likely will not be, but chances are you just have to do good work. You got to put away your ego, and you got to make sure that good work will eventually come to light, and you'll eventually, reap the rewards of being somebody who really cares about what you're doing. I know a few UVA students who've graduated since, and I've had to be like, no, don't worry. Like, it's okay that you're a staffer and nobody's really asking for your opinion. That's just how it is. That's just how everybody is. But UVA, I think, churns out some really excellent students, and it really shows. And sometimes the reputation precedes you. And sometimes it's a little difficult to try and live up to that, but at the end of the day, you'll be well prepared by the time you get there. You just got to make sure that, like, it's okay that you're not like, like the second in command of anything after a year being out in the workforce. That's okay. I mean, UVA, right? You become a leader of an organization within like 9 months. That's not how it works over here. But at least at the end of the day, you start making money. So just know that um, you can start doing other stuff, and you don't have homework probably.
Yeah, to Alex's point, that's great. I think it's very easy to get caught up on when you're on campus and you get involved in these organizations and you're super active and you're always busy and you have something to do. Um, and when you go into that first job and it's an entry level job, there's a lot of times you're not going to be busy and you're going to have to sit and you're going to have you're going to feel stuck in some sort of ways. And so recognizing that is the case. I really struggled with that when I went to my first job. Is I was like, okay, I am bored out of my mind, right? I have so much time on my hand, like I am not doing anything at work. Like, what should I, how can you can't let that feeling go under, unutilized. You've got to be able to figure out how to self-assess for you and figure out what you want to do and how to get there. And so for me, I started my master's and got a master's online in strategic communication with an emphasis in public policy while I was in that first job, because I was like, I need something else to help me churn the wheels in my brain to help keep me focused that this is the right path, but it just needs to take time to mature and to earn my seat at the table, right? Because none of this is given. And so you still have to be an active participant and in your career and in professional and personal life. But I will say um, one of the hardest lessons that I had to learn is that when you transition from that, you have to learn to listen to understand and not listen to respond in a lot of ways. And when you are able to make that shift, and I still struggle with it today because I think I know what I know what I believe in, and I think I know what is best, but that may not be what's best for the situation. And so when you learn to listen to everybody and really comprehend what they're saying and then come up with a response, it makes you a better professional, but also makes you a better person because you're able to tailor that to your personal and professional life.
Yeah, I think Zach, you made a really good point, which reminded me of some of my early days, even here in the city of Richmond, which now I'm like, how was I ever not busy? But um I think that especially in those early times, it's a great opportunity, especially as like high achieving folks that you all are being at UVA. It's a great opportunity to develop new skills, to bring ideas to your boss or to your colleagues and say, hey, this is something that, I don't think we're working on or thinking out enough. I put this proposal together, or I learned this new skill. Like one thing I did in my early days was I spent a fair amount of time using GIS, which is a mapping tool. And now I'm the person in the office where people come and ask me if I can make maps for them. And I was like, wait, this is just a hobby. I don't actually know. I'm not a professional in mapping. But I used some of that time that I had early in my time here in the city to develop a new skill and do something that was kind of interesting and challenged me a little bit, and is now something that I use when I get the time to, is something that I use in my job. And so I think that is a really good point, Zach made, that even in those times where maybe there's a lull or you're bored, that gives you a lot of opportunity to learn from your colleagues, to learn new skills, to see how you can be impactful. And I think that's, again, something special about kind of the local and state government, is like you can bring those ideas forward. You can think about issues that you might think are important or programs, and bring them to bear potentially.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for your insights and your willingness to share all your experiences. And so now I would love to turn it over to students. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat and we can read them out for you. Okay, well, I have another question that I would love to know. What sort of experiences or internships would be valuable for students to participate in to kind of get their foot in the door for state and local government work?
I would say there's no bad experience. An internship is just as much finding out, or is about finding out what you like as it is as what you don't like. all of my internships were in production agriculture focused, and I lived in the Midwest, and I loaded train cars full of grain, or I worked out scouting crops and spraying for weeds and pests, and now working on education policy. And so I think that there's certainly a learning aspect in every experience, but what the most important thing is I think is if you know where you want to go and you know what that dream job is, start then, kind of backtracking to what have you looked at other people that have occupied that job? What have they done to get there? What experiences did they have? But particularly, in the state government, interning with a local delegate, interning with a local representative. There's a lot of the congressional folks, statewide reps that have offices close to the college campuses that you could intern right off campus. Sometimes it's paid and sometimes it's unpaid, or you can maybe get credit for it. But also to Alex's point, going asking city council folks if you can, work with them, shadow them, job shadow. An internship or an externship doesn't have to be a formal thing. You can create one by just having a conversation with somebody too. And so don't be afraid to put yourself out there and ask for that. But the Governor's Fellowship Program, Alex went through that. It's a great program. You are a true member of the governor's team, and the cabinet secretariat that you are stationed with. And that's a great way to get the exposure into both the executive branch and taking implementation from what the legislature passes, and how do you implement that? Because that's when all that happens. July 1, over the summer is when all the laws, go into effect. And so the agencies have to be prepared to implement those things. And so you're learning a lot about the processes that go into what makes the state government run. And so I would definitely recommend the Governor's Fellows Program. It's for rising seniors or just graduated seniors. Even if you're going into your master's program, you can still take part in that. So I think that those are some key ways to get in. But again, there's no bad experience to get you there. It's just about as learning what you like and what you don't like.
So we have a question in the chat from Brooke. So for students who are studying or majoring in specific content areas in which they're interested in exploring within public policy, so things like public health, environmental science, art, what do you recommend they do to learn more about public policy in those sectors, even after college as well?
Yeah, I think that, that's something that local and state government is really well suited for. You can find an agency and organization and be fully specialized in that one thing and become the expert, if you will, on that one thing. I think Alex, and I won't speak for him, but I imagine that, he works on probably a bigger breadth of different issues and topics, whereas I day in, day out, am thinking and breathing housing and housing related things. I personally didn't, go into government saying I really want to work in housing, but I did, see the overlaps and it's aligned with, the type of work that I wanted to be doing. And I think it also has given me an opportunity, even if you don't land in a space that's the exact fit of maybe what you're studying or what you think is your passion area. There's a lot of overlaps. That you can still apply those skills, even if it's not a perfect match. If you're an environmental science and policy person and you don't end up, working for the Department of Outdoors or something like that, right? Like you still, or Department of Environmental Quality, for example, at the state level, you still have the opportunity, I think, to align your skills and your interests.
Any other questions from our students? Oh yeah, Miranda.
Hi, thank you guys so much for coming to speak with us today. I was wondering if you could pinpoint the best piece of advice you received early on in your career and how you've applied it.
Sure, I can go take a stab at the first go around here, but I think for me, and I said this at the last panel, Dreama, but um, job hunting is extremely personal, and it can be really vulnerable experience, especially when you are graduating college and trying to find your first job. And it can be really easy to get discouraged in that process, especially if you're getting some no's, because nobody likes that, right? Nobody likes to get told no, but especially when it's coming to your future. But the most important thing about job searching is that it cannot be private. You have got to be able to let people know that you are searching for opportunities in that space. You've got to be able to deploy your network, you know, but that comes with you have to build a network up to that point, right? So, and when you're applying for jobs and you know, say it's with a delegate's office or it's with the governor's office or a congressional or a local government, find people in your network that know people that work there. Share share your resume with them. Tell them what you're looking for. Tell them what job you applied for. And if you have a contact there, and ask them if they are willing to put in a word for you. And so when you are applying for these jobs and you've got people reaching out on your behalf, your stack of resumes that are all your name is much higher than anybody else's because you have deployed your network, letting people know that you are serious about this job and that you've got a lot of people in your corner that are willing to support you. So that, automatically shows that if you've got people that are willing to stick their neck out for you, that you're probably worth at least an interview, right? Doesn't mean that you'll get the job, but it means that you're probably worth at least a conversation with. And so just make sure that when you are searching for those jobs or you don't know what you want to do, have those conversations, ask for help, ask for guidance, and ask people to reach out on your behalf and stick up for you because more often than not, people are more than willing to help you, but they just don't know that you need help or they don't know the best way to help you. So you've got to be very specific in that ask so that they know exactly the best way to support you in that endeavor.
I'll give two somewhat related things. One that I intuitively knew while at UVA, but definitely bore out some, excellent, results when I was, when I started working is embrace mentor-mentee relationships, right? Find a mentor, find somebody who can help you out because people want to help, right? People want to help younger folks succeed, and particularly in public service and particularly in the political side of public service, people want to help other younger folks because at some point they're going to be in positions of responsibility. And that's just beneficial for everyone to have a good relationship with others and say that, hey, I knew this person when they just started out. So embrace those mentor-mentee relationships. If you're a first year, second year, find a third or fourth year, right? That you look up to, and do the same thing once you start your career. And the flip side is the same, right? If you're a third or fourth year, find a first or second year and try to bring them up because nothing is better than seeing the things that you care about and your passions find themselves flowering in somebody else after you're gone. And then the other side of that is once you start your career or as you're looking for, where you want to settle, find a particular person who seems really super cool, who has the perfect career, perfect job that they have that you could imagine, who's like 30 years into their career, and be like, what did they do to get there? And see what you can do to maybe somewhat emulate what they did. And even if you don't come anywhere near that, you might chart a path that gets you to where you want to be. So again, embrace mentor-mentee relationships and then identify role models.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'll add is that I think like there's this whole concept when you're in college and you're coming up, whether you're looking for an internship or a job or what have you, of networking, and you're like, what is this networking thing? And networking doesn't mean that you have to ask someone for a job or, hand them your resume or follow up every week with an email checking in to see how they are. But it's kind of, as Alex said, really relationship building of developing trust. And then networking is not also one-sided. I think that's something that's also really important to remember is like, while you at some point, especially in this point in your path and in your career, you may more often be the one asking for help. But you also can be the one offering that help. I think a kind of good example of this is I have somebody here in the city of Richmond who I worked on a project right when I started, and I was like, oh, this is a really awesome person to work with. She's super smart. She's done and doing what I think I would like to be doing. And she really took me in and went even beyond sort of that mentorship piece and became sort of a sponsor for me to say, and it's really valuable to have people like that. I cannot say that enough. Where that person might be in a room and you're not there and they're not even talking about you, but that person says, hey, I think, Rachel or Alex would be really helpful in this project and I'd love to loop them in. Having somebody like that is really valuable, but then also knowing that you can be that person for them. So then that person reached out to me recently. There's been shifts in the administration. And they said, hey, I'm really considering this other role in the city. I would love to know about your experience. Do you think I would be a good fit for this? And I was like so shocked for that. I was like, right, I'm kind of new still in my career. How could I possibly provide this person with useful information? But I was able to give back to that relationship that I had found so valuable. And I think that's something important to know too, is I think that whole idea of networking, building your network and having conversations with strangers can be really daunting, but really it's just about relationship building, just like you would when you're making new friends. And then you can use that.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for this wonderful conversation and students for your wonderful questions. This is really insightful information, and I hope that students are able to take away some lots of big takeaways as you're kind of exploring this career field more or applying to them depending on what stage in your career development you are in. So yeah, Dreama, is there anything else that we would like to say?
Again, just a virtual round.